I went to see this documentary at Channel 4. They follow her for the period in which she's having this enormous orgy, basically, on camera. She recruits 1,057, she says, men. You know, it's that level of depravity. It would be very difficult to say that she's deeply disturbed by what she's doing. I don't think she is at all. She says, I don't feel like emotions like other people, and I really did believe her. I think she's, cheerfully sociopathic. And I think this is a sort of liberal attempt to find something wrong with it. Usually takes a certain form, which is, there must be something in her background that explains this. I don't think there is. I think we're just all so squeamish about exerting moral judgments in the realm of sex. And I certainly know that when I was teaching in universities, some of my students were content creators. So this is a phenomenon that needs addressing and analysing.
Should we take to the streets with placards saying no more Bonnie Blue, down with OnlyFans? Hello and welcome back to UnHerd. Today we have a treat for you as one of our favourites has agreed to join us here down the line. I am talking about Kathleen Stock, who you may think of as someone who became famous for bringing sanity to the gender question and since has become, I think, one of the finest columnists that certainly we have and anyone has. Do check her out if you haven't. Kathleen Stock, welcome back to UnHerd.
Hi, Freddie. Nice to be here.
We sent you on a bit of a strange mission last week to go and look at the premiere of someone called Bonnie Blue. And later that week, you went to the Roger Scruton Foundation to talk about philosophy. And you wrote this most extraordinary piece in UnHerd, which connected those two experiences, which might appear to most people to be completely opposite. Can we start with the first one? So Bonnie Blue, for the hopefully majority of people watching this, let's hope that they don't yet know who she is a porn star.
She's a porn star, but she's a porn star that's come up through OnlyFans, which is revolutionizing porn content. So that's a significant thing about her, that she has subscribers to her channel. In fact, she's not with OnlyFans anymore for reasons we'll go into, but she became known through OnlyFans, and she has become famous or infamous for the extreme sex stunts that she performs. She's sort of in competition with this other creator called Lily Phillips, and I've written about both of them before. There's this bizarre rivalry between them to outdo each other in how many men they can sleep with, or not sleep with, God, that's a misnomer, but basically have sex with or have some kind of sexual contact with in a certain number of hours. It's like a, awful Guinness Book of Records challenge or something. Both of them, but let's talk about Bonnie. The gimmick is ordinary men from the street, not content creators. So she puts out these calls. If you're barely legal or barely breathing, meet me in Oxford Circus. She hires an Airbnb. She films penetrative sex with these men who are sort of all in a queue, some of them wearing balaclavas because they don't want their wives to see them. And then she sells that content back to her channel for clicks. So that's the business model, and it served her really well. She's making millions, and OnlyFans itself has just floated for $8 billion.
It's worth saying the reason she got extra infamous was that supposedly more than 1,000 men had sex with her in one 24-hour period in one of these
12 actually sessions. 12. Yes, I mean, whether that's true, I don't see how it's possible, but in this, so the Channel 4 have made a documentary about her, which is the sort of pretext, and I went to see this documentary at Channel 4, but in that documentary they follow her for the period in which she's having this enormous orgy, basically, on camera. She recruits 1,057, she says, men, and they're just all waiting in line.
Are they actually putting out the sex scenes on terrestrial TV?
Yes, they are. So part of this Channel 4 documentary actually uses some, I think I'm not sure if it's their footage or her footage, but anyway, there's some extremely explicit footage of what goes on in that room as part of the documentary.
I'm just going to pause here and address this question, because why are we even talking about her? She's on the front cover of The Times, interviewed by prestigious interviewers who normally are talking to politicians or captains of industry with a special photo shoot. She's all over the place, and the mainstream media are giving her huge amounts of airtime and boosting her profile in this way that is obviously titillating and obviously is selling newspapers and kind of people are interested in it. And then there's a sort of softly critical gloss. What's your take on that? And are we guilty of it ourselves?
Yeah, well, I'm not softly critical. I try and bring out the human aspects of this situation. And there's some quite amusing things about it in some ways, darkly amusing, which I try to bring out. But if the media entered into some kind of mutual agreement that they weren't going to ever talk about Bonnie Blue, perhaps that would help. But obviously, it's a collective action problem, and some people are going to be talking about her. More to the point, she's got enormous reach through OnlyFans. In fact, it's part of her deliberate strategy to become as notorious and provocative as possible in order that her name grows. So I think at some point you just got to allow that she's out there, and we need to think about what the response should be to people like her, not her in particular, but she's not the only one. There's this other woman, like I said, Lily Phillips, who's also engaged in these stunts. And more to the point, in the UK, one of the facts that did come out in this documentary is that we've got one of the highest numbers of content creators in the world in the UK. So Bonnie Blue and Lily Phillips are the most notorious, but chances are, you probably even know a content creator. And I certainly know that when I was teaching in universities, some of my students were content creators. So this is a phenomenon that needs addressing and analysing.
I guess to you or I, or maybe to our listeners and viewers, it might obviously be just frankly disgusting to be attempting to have sex with 1,000 men in one day. It's just obviously utterly disgusting and reprehensible even. I mean, most people, if you thought about your children growing up and doing something like that, would be absolutely appalled. I feel like intuitively, those kinds of feminists who used to talk about sex work as some kind of empowering thing to do would have a very difficult time defending this.
I actually don't know about that. I agree it needs to be pushed back. I think we need to develop a vocabulary very fast to address this with some disapproval, which does not obviously mean stringing anyone up for it, but much more basically being able to say this is wrong, this is absolutely wrong. And funnily enough, at this premiere, which was full of journalists and the documentary maker was there, and she seemed to be a nice liberal woman who started off sort of saying that she was a bit worried for her teenage daughter, what all this meant, but then ended up pretty much making a fairly non-judgmental film for a start. And secondly, in the questioning, proved utterly incapable of saying anything remotely critical. I mean, it was all like, well, it's her thing, we should park our judgment. And I just think actually the feminism has mainstream feminism doesn't really have any tools to criticize this because of choice. This, the word choice, it's her choice.
My body, my choice.
Yes, and that's exactly what Bonnie Blue says. She says, I'm what you've been working for. I'm a girl boss. I'm an entrepreneur. I make lots of money. I'm completely in control. I consent. I know what I like and what I don't. And I'm keen to say when I don't want something and when I do. So as far as she's concerned, it's all fine. So what are we going to say to that? And I think it's going to require us to have a richer vocabulary than just, oh, well, if you like it, it's okay.
And I think that's where the second part of our conversation about Roger Scruton is going to come in. But just before we get into that, tell us a bit more about what your sense was on just a human level of seeing this woman. She used to be an NHS finance recruiter, apparently.
Yeah, she did.
And in your piece, you said that her mum and dad were at this screening.
Well, her mum and her granny. Her dad wasn't mentioned, but her mum and her granny was there.
I mean,
she did
what was on the face of the granny?
Well, I did that. We were all in this auditorium. I mean, the only bit of sort of shadow of something approaching shame that Bonnie Blue showed was when she said that afterwards she was a bit surprised. She hadn't seen the film before. No, so we were all seeing it for the first time. She didn't know that it was going to be that explicit. And she said something like, sorry, Gran, or something like that. But her mum's fully aware because her mum's like, I don't know, somehow involved in her career. So what's she like? Well, she's funny. She's very, very quick-witted and she makes jokes all the time. It would be very difficult to say that she's deeply disturbed by what she's doing. I don't think she is at all. She says, I don't feel like emotions like other people. And I really did believe her. I think I basically say, cheerfully sociopathic. And I don't mean that in a sort of criminal way, but I just mean she's not really in touch with feelings that lots of other people are in touch with. And that seems really clear.
Reminds me a little bit of Ayala, who we had on this show who
Possibly.
is a
I mean, some people are.
OnlyFans creator and also feels strangely unemotional about sex.
Yeah, some people are. And you could say that's disassociation, and you can speculate about what must have been traumatic in her life. But there's no sign in this particular case of any background trauma. And it just doesn't have to be. And again, I think this is the sort of liberal attempt to find something wrong with it usually takes a certain form, which is, oh, there must be something in her background that explains this. I don't think there is. I think she's just fine with it. She doesn't object in the same way that anyone else might. So really, it's not a question of saving her from this. It's a question of all these other poor saps that are getting drawn into this myth that she's creating, that you won't feel anything, because most of us would feel something in that situation. Most of us would be destroyed by it.
You will correct me here because you are the philosophy professor, but is that not still really a liberal critique to say that it sets an example that for less resilient or more vulnerable people could lead them into dangerous or difficult situations? What about condemning what she's doing on its own terms?
I think you can do both. I mean, the reason I mentioned that is because there's this highly disturbing part of the documentary, sort of the closest it gets to some kind of internal critique, where Bonnie, whose real name is Tia Billinger, it seems weird to call her Bonnie Blue, she's called Tia Billinger, but she hires a classroom and organizes a sex scene with these extremely young girls that, I mean, they're legal, but she's recruited them because they look really young. She dresses them up in school uniforms. And these are girls who are not like her. These are nervous, stammering, tiny little accounts on OnlyFans. And the reason they're there, she's not paying them, is to get involved with this so that they think they can get some traffic to their sites now. And so you just really see in action the sort of the drag of this, as it were, for people who are less cheerfully sociopathic.
And the involvement of Channel 4, which is actually a public service broadcaster, last time I checked, in theory, you can, that's a fair critique, isn't it? Why are they airing scenes with these women?
Well, they don't air this. You don't see the scenes,
right.
Thank God. But no, that's the bit that actually comes closest to public interest because you see the sort of emotion. These girls are so nervous and they're stammering and they just look so vulnerable. They're not this sort of brassy kind of I don't care. They're not millionaires. They haven't got their own stylists and their own publicists, which she does, Bonnie Blue does. It's wrong. But anyway, you're right. I actually think that what we are failing to do is, as a collective culture, is to say that the harm is not always to be couched in terms of effect on vulnerable people. It degrades us all. It degrades sex itself. And this is where, since the next day I was going to Scrutopia, which is a summer school run in Roger Scruton's memory by his family and friends and colleagues, I thought I would revisit a book of his, which is called Sexual Desire, where he makes exactly that case, that sexual desire is something completely between two people and it's not objectifying. I mean, you could say this is idealistic, but at least he's trying to specify a conception of sex that's not religious, but it firmly puts some stuff beyond the pale because they are degrading, dehumanizing, objectifying, and bring us all down into the gutter.
So let's just try and detail a bit more what his approach is, because the late Roger Scruton did have this quite special role in that I think he probably was a Christian or church-going, and sort of gently Church of England type of Christian, but not an especially religious one, it would appear. And the language he uses...
Not in his philosophy.
And not in his philosophy, right? So, and that's what's so valuable, I think, about what he was doing, because he can talk about moral questions and questions of things that are sacred without requiring you to be Christian or from a different religion to understand them. What is his argument for why sex is sacred?
You can understand it as part of his general quest to get rid of these reductive theories we all seem so entranced with, whether they're scientific ones or, in this case, sexology, or psychoanalysts, sort of to try the pretense is in all these narratives of stripping back the appearances to the real stuff. So in the world of sex, it's like, oh, we've got all these sort of old-fashioned ideas that sex should be between two people that love each other. But, you know, that's just a mere cultural appearance. What we really need to do is go down to the basics, which is that it's just basically seeking pleasure through mutual masturbation, or it's a way of propagating our genes, or it's an attempt to regain childhood attachments that we've repressed in a sort of Freudian vein, you know, but whatever it is, get rid of all that sort of cultural stuff and get back to the real stuff. But he points out you can't get, there is no deeper stuff here. There's just another set of appearances, and all we do is to, you know, get rid of one set of enchanted, sacred, loving appearances, as it were. That is a cultural way of thinking about sex that has actually brought people together in union and has bolstered families and has, you know, had all sorts of useful effects as well. And we replaced it with promiscuity, debasement, prostitution, pornography, selling our bodies, or some people selling their bodies and other people buying their bodies. That's just another set of appearances. It doesn't get us any nearer the real phenomenon. So that's the sort of strategy. And then he, as Roger, and I say Roger because I did actually know him a bit, so I'm not just being massively overfamiliar, but he was always very idealistic. In his definitions, he would basically take the version of the world he wanted and then just say, that is, you know, I define whatever I'm looking at in terms of this kind of normative version. So in his work on imagination and fantasy, for instance, he makes fantasy all the bad stuff and imagination all the good stuff, which, you know, is quite convenient and it's not necessarily massively persuasive as a exercise in conceptual analysis. But in this case, he's saying sexual desire, the good stuff, I'm just going to call that sexual desire, and I'm going to call all the other stuff that Bonnie Blue's up to, it's not really sexual desire, it's something else. Now, whether that works or not, at least he gives us a story about this kind of mutual discovery of another person in the sexual act. It's very particular. You're discovering that particular person. You can't just ship in another person. You can't replace them with somebody else. You can't pay for it. It's the opposite of objectification. It's almost discovering who someone is in the act of like giving each other mutual pleasure. So
per Scruton, it is at its best, at least, a soulful kind of act which requires more of you and is more significant than just a kind of bodily titillation.
Exactly. And crucially, something I should have brought out is it's not directed towards body parts. It's directed towards a person. And the face is just as important as any sort of particular body part. Now, I'm sure there are people listening thinking, rolling their eyes and going, oh, that's not what sex is like. How ridiculous, how refined, you know, overly refined. But you look at Bonnie Blue, this documentary, and you see these men in balaclavas and boxer shorts snaking up the stairs. Their faces are not going to be involved in this, you know, their identities, their names, nothing about them. They are getting 2 seconds of bodily contact with this woman. You start to think, well, maybe Scruton had a point.
So although it's not couched in Christian terms, it is somehow defiling something that should be sacred, or at least, you know, I'm tempted back into this kind of liberal language, which is persuading people that you have worse sex, or that you somehow reduce your net pleasure, or at least flatten your whole existence in some way that is bad for you by pursuing this. I mean, is there a way of explaining it there? Because it is very hard to go down this road without just sounding like a censorious Victorian. So I think what you say about the language is so right. Like, what kind of language can you use which isn't necessarily Christian but tries to communicate it?
See, maybe this is my idealism showing, but I think that the critics of the sort of things I'm saying are stuck in an old paradigm. You know, they literally are no doubt people will say, Kathleen, you sound so Victorian, as if, you know, we're talking about remotely the same universe anymore. We're not. We're talking about a universe in which young girls can just from their bedrooms expose their body parts, stick stuff in them, have sex on camera with endless men. You know, so easily, and they're doing it. So, this is not, so in other words, I think we're reaching a point, it's a bit like boiling a frog. The frog is getting boiled, it's no longer just talking about a few unmarried mothers in the 60s or, just sex out of wedlock. We're not in that world anymore. We are in a completely different world where our young people are going into that world, and they are being exposed to this stuff. Even if we never talk about it, they will see it. As I say, I left university sector, 5 years ago? And when I left, there were young women supplementing their student incomes by doing OnlyFans work. I've no doubt that's increased. So, I feel like we don't really have to have many words. There's not a technical explanation of what this woman is doing, and by proxy, other women are doing, and men are too. I mean, men are participating in this. It feels abhorrent. And all I'm asking is that we get better at saying so rather than waiting for laws to come in and fix it for us or somebody else to sort it out. We are going to have to start saying this is wrong.
I'm going to get one more go of more the philosophy professor with you, because it does remind me of the days when I was trying to understand Plato, this idea that, the good, the true and the beautiful. His ideas on sex were very much that impulse is in some way looking towards the good or the beautiful or some kind of true ideal out there, even if it's in a debased or less perfect way, and that in some way those sexual impulses are the noblest and best if they are directed in the right way. How would you explain that, and is Plato relevant?
Well, I'm not. I mean, I must admit I use the word Platonic ideal as a sort of to explain roughly what he's doing rather than to attribute a lot of Plato to Scruton. But I mean, look, Scruton's a conservative in the sense that he wants to conserve the beautiful, the good, the true, the things that over centuries we cultures have through what he would say the invisible hand, not meaning necessarily Adam Smith's market argument, but just a kind of unplanned result of civic associations. We've got these beautiful institutions, these wonderful practices, these norms and conventions. Now, he wants to keep them. At the moment, the internet is changing things so fast, particularly in terms of sexual culture, that it's not so much keeping what's beautiful as fighting what's obviously ugly, I think. And I think we're reaching a point where we can now see, most of us can see, if we're not pretending otherwise, that there's something exceptionally ugly about sexual culture, and it won't get better on its own. We do have to participate. We have to take responsibility, and other things Scruton was very keen on. It's going to be down to individuals to push back against this culture rather than hoping someone else is going to sort it out.
So how are we supposed to do that? Should we take to the streets with placards saying no more Bonnie Blue, down with OnlyFans? Should we, what are the practical
Why not?
steps?
I mean, actually, I don't mind that at all. But one thing I've noticed in the current discussion of the online safety bill, I follow and I'm in touch with a lot of people on the right, and I see a lot of criticism of the online safety bill, perhaps deservedly so. It does look like a bit of a dog's dinner, and there's lots of sorts of speech that look like they'll be affected that will be a problem. But what I don't hear is conservatives leading with clearly the intention to stop children looking at extreme pornography is the right one. That's where they should start. They're conservatives. Now start with that, and then maybe talk about why we should have legislation that focuses only on pornography and maybe not these other kinds of speech, but pornography is the thing I'm talking about. I am really surprised, or no, maybe not surprised, because I think we're just all so squeamish about exerting moral judgments in the realm of sex. And that's come from the 1960s, and nobody wants to look uncool and like a prude. And, we all remember how Mary Whitehouse was treated, etc. But, I'm getting to a point now where I don't care anymore. I think this is wrong. And I have a daughter. I just can't bear the thought of her logging on and seeing girls with ejaculate all over their faces, with their eyes so red that they can't see, and they're taking pictures of themselves for money. It's that level of depravity.
Just to stay on the Online Safety Act for a second, because I completely share your sense that it's a bit of a schizophrenic moment. Actually, I'm probably not allowed to use that term lightly, but a moment of contradiction in the political right, because if you think of really famous characters in the populist right, J.D. Vance comes to mind. It's really been like a central part of their outrage that the political right and society in general has just surrendered to hyperliberalism, to the vagaries of the market. There's this sense that we can't actually morally direct society anymore. And really a big part of his mission appears to be, well, no, we need to say that government is for the good and we should repurpose it to do good things and stop bad things, right? So in a way, something like the Online Safety Act, in theory, if it were a good instrument designed to stop children watching online pornography, yeah, it should be hugely celebrated on the political right, but you don't really hear that.
Possibly because of the interconnection with America, but America's messed up on the issue of pornography because they treat it as an issue of speech and they think it's protected under the First Amendment. And I don't think pornography is speech. I think it's bizarre to think of it as speech. Obviously, you can have pornographic speech, but they would treat even films as speech and this sort of speech, and it's a legal fiction kind of thing. So we can't look to them for leadership on this particular issue, as far as I can see. And yes, I agree with you. I mean, like I say, when I read Zia Yusuf's piece on the online safety bill, and he was saying, oh, well, kids are just going to get VPNs anyway. They're going to find it. That's talking as if like millions and millions of children all act as one on this issue and they're all going to go and get VPNs. Even if half of them got VPNs and half of them didn't, that would be millions of children who are not watching extreme violent sex involving, I mean, I can name the things. I don't know if people are aware of the things that are being done online and that anyone can access. They can access them on X now. There's a whole ecosystem of extreme porn on X.
As I understand it, the skepticism or the downright opposition to something like the Online Safety Act from the political right is based on their own causes having been censored and rejected. And we experienced this during COVID, for example. You experienced this during the gender wars. I mean, these were sensible ideas that should have been out there that ended up being censored. So they're not crazy to worry that this could become an instrument of censorship. And they, I guess, are also right to be skeptical that a government bureaucracy is going to get it right. We understand that Ofcom is being kind of massively staffed up and they're hiring hundreds and hundreds of people to now police the internet. And your heart sinks because you can't imagine that they're going to do it well. But if the alternative is just giving up, then what are we supposed to do?
So we're supposed to do something better. I mean, it's probably too late now. This bill's here, but there's got to be a political will for it. But basically, whatever happens, protecting children from pornography is a completely separate project to protecting them from whatever, even suicide websites. I actually think suicide websites are terrible. But you could see how somebody could say, no, I'm going to focus on pornography as the thing that we're going to protect children from. And let's talk about those other things separately. Or, I don't know, this vague notion of psychological harm, stuff online that hate speech, stuff that encourages self-harm, anorexia. All of them sound bad, but the government just kind of bundled them all. Well, the previous government bundled them up into one big, oh God, this all sounds awful, and says, right, we're going to deal with all of that. That was the overreach, and it brought a lot of complexity into an issue which shouldn't even be that hard. I think we could easily have AI that recognized the presence of naked, thrusting bodies and put an age limit on it. That's all we're asking for,
So is that really not the key factor that people are sort of overlooking in this controversy? It's just age. Right? I feel like people don't understand that you can be quite a diehard libertarian in terms of what you believe to be right for adults who are part of the democratic community and what they should be allowed to see and hear, but still be really quite strict about what minors should be able to see. That's not incoherent. That's sort of sensible.
It's a tiny little ask, really, frankly. And again, the fact that people are reacting so over the top to this ask, which is, as you say, it's about age. It's not about banning it completely. It's not about putting these things out of business. It's just about age. So I think we've got some evidence right there that we are unable to defend a healthy sexual culture if we can't, as I say, if these right-wingers and conservatives can't even say, actually, that bit we like. Let's just be clear. We like that bit. We want to keep that bit in whatever goes forward. We would like that bit.
Final thought then for our audience, whether they're watching or listening, does this make us all conservative if we're talking like this? I mean, is this...
afraid so.
I mean, well, does it though, Kathleen? Because I think the Bonnie Blue story is actually quite a useful one in a sense, because you don't have to be either politically conservative with a capital C or anything else to be kind of appalled and disgusted by that. So in a way, it's quite a unifying moment.
Yes. Another reason why it's a good thing to talk about it, frankly. But yes, no, I have become fine with saying I'm a social conservative. I'm a lesbian mother, who's a social conservative, because social conservatives are relative to the culture they swim in. And I don't like this culture that I swim in. I wouldn't have called myself a cultural social conservative like 20 years ago, and now I do. It's a relative concept. Now, obviously, that there's a stigma attached to that still. The left will immediately seize on that as some kind of revelation. But I mean, really, these concepts like left, right, conservatism, they're so massively contested anyway. I think it's fine. And yes, let's take it back. I mean, I don't want to see commercial surrogacy. I don't want to see children accessing extreme porn or making it, whatever, I don't know, or growing up to think that that's the way they're going to make money when they get the age of majority. I think, yeah, I'm a social conservative. That's what that means.
Well, you've come out as a social conservative then on this channel, Kathleen. And I guess if you're listening to this and you think that having sex with 1,000 men in 12 hours on camera is bad, then you're a social conservative too.
Yeah, I've got bad news for you. You're all good.
Kathleen Stock, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Freddie.
That was Professor Kathleen Stock, now our star columnist at UnHerd. Do check out her essays that we publish every week at unherd.com. Just like she did there, bringing together Bonnie Blue, a porn star that probably everyone would rather not have heard of, with the late Roger Scruton, conservative philosopher. Who would have thought that those two people belong in the same conversation? But there you have it. Thanks to Kathleen, and thanks to you for tuning in. This was UnHerd.